Duncan, are we ready to go?
Councilor, are we ready to go? Good to go? All right. The time is 6 o'clock. I'm going to call to order a regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Sunset Valley, Texas for Tuesday, August 1st, 2023. Just as a note, Council, we are not going to have number 7 as a consent item. We're going to go ahead and pull that from consent. We will have it as an agenda item, but just as awareness, that one we want to have a discussion based on an update from the City Administrator. With that, we will open up for public comments. And so at this time, if anybody wishes to speak, please step up to the podium and state your name. And
Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Reese. I want to speak in praise of our Public Works Department. I spent 2 weeks in Mexico, every time having to worry about brushing my teeth or doing water in any shape or form. And it's just such a gift, and I think an underappreciated thing as to how much time our Public Works Department spends keeping our water safe. People say, oh, it's just water that comes from the city also, but that really isn't the case. All the checks, all the things, the weekends that these people do to make sure that I can turn on a faucet and not have to worry. So I just want to elevate that in people's minds, because people, I think, underestimate the amount of time it takes to make that magic happen. And on agenda item number 9, so deep appreciation to to all members of the Public Works Department who make that happen. And on agenda item 9, I believe, which is the reorg, I do think that there are some items that might need to be reorganized, but I think that there's a shortage of data of the long-term financial impacts of some of the proposed changes, and I would really like to see quite a bit more backup before we do something that impacts our long-term financial health. I would love to see figures to back up what the impacts would be of all these changes, and to see which ones we want to pay for, because if we put money one place, we're taking it from somewhere else. And I think we just need to be able to have a long-term analysis of what those choices are. So I do respect the work of all our staff and appreciate them and want them to feel supported, but I also want us to be able to look at this as we do any other project, that we say we're taking on a project and we need to know what the financial implications are. Thank you all so much for your time.
thank you. If anybody else wishes to speak, please do so at this time. All right, we're going to move on to agenda item number 3, which is staff reports. Before we begin, I just also want to thank the staff for an item that's not in the staff reports, but it happened over the weekend, which is the Violet Crown Trail ceremony. Public Works staff was out there providing information about the city, but also support to the trail organizers, the Hill Country Conservancy. And so I think it was really a well-attended event, and thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your weekend to do that. We even had, I think, some of our summer youth members there getting some extra time at the last week of their program. So thank you for that support. So we're going to move on to the administration reports, beginning with the city administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll highlight a few items from the admin report. Obviously, the budget is filed next week. We had to rearrange our schedule with Budget and Finance Committee, and their last meeting regarding the FY24 budget will actually be next Thursday. So we'll be hosting that agenda with the final draft of the budget as recommended by Budget and Finance on Friday for that meeting Thursday. Thursday, the Budget and Finance Committee will, have their final review and overview of the budget, and we'll also be revisiting sales tax revenue projections, very important for our budgeting process. And then the mayor will file the budget on August 10th, and then our first meeting with the council and the public for the FY24 budget will be August 15th, and then we'll have another hearing on September 5th, I believe. And then the budget is set for adoption for September 19th. Of course, if something comes up and we have to call another meeting, we can. But we're hopeful that we can have the budget adopted by September 19th. We've begun training with the new ERP software. I attended a class this morning with finance staff, and just looking at the capabilities, I cannot wait till we have this new system. It's going to be better for the staff. It's going to be better for all staff, and it's going to be better, I think much better, as we're presenting reports to council and to committees. It's just going to be a complete overhaul of our system. I can't wait till it is implemented. Upcoming events, so the Criminal Justice Youth Open House, that event had to be postponed. I do not believe we have a makeup date for that, but just we'll be providing more information on that. There is a grand reopening event for community event for City Hall that's Friday, August 11th from 9:30 to 11. So we hope that council members and residents can make it out to that event. Any questions from the admin report?
Just one. It says FY22 financial audit in progress, target completion September 30th?
Yes. Yes, there were delays on
No,
the
this is not a delay. Normally
Oh.
it's not done until like in
yeah,
spring.
no, we wanted to have it sooner, but we should be done by September 30th. That's the target date. We might have yeah, that's our target date for completion.
My compliments,
Yeah.
especially after last year.
Yeah. and already we're starting the when we wrap up that audit, we'll start the engagement with our new firm. So, and they're ready to get started as soon as we wrap up the FY22 audit to get started on the audit for fiscal year 23. Yeah.
Any other questions about the admin report? Okay. Move on to Public Works.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and I want to echo what the Mayor said. Thank you for everybody coming out to the Violet Crown Trail ribbon cutting event. It was a lot of fun that day. Even though it was hot, I think it was a perfect amount of time to be out there and then to head back somewhere else in the AC because it was very hot that day. I just want to highlight a few things, and then I'm going to pass it off to Dakota to give a little bit of a CIP update. So I want to start with there will be a grand opening here at City Hall next Friday, kind of a reopening. Invite everybody in from 9 until 11:30. And then talk a little bit about the backflow kind of thing that I've kind of mentioned here on Oakdale. There is every one of our connections with the City of Austin has a backflow associated with it. And of course, the Oakdale water line it's not a water line that's looped in with the rest of the city systems anywhere. It's just a single feed off of Brody right there. And all of the hydrants pass their annual inspection on there regarding water pressure and the needed flows for fire protection. But the development at 6405 Brody has, based on their calculations, it does not meet the 1,500 gallons per minute they were looking for. And then we just recently heard from them that it doesn't meet the 1,250. We think there may be some things there we can address regarding how that is calculated. And we have had in the past that one house on Oakdale, once that house was being built really far, some of those lots on Oakdale are very, very deep. When you started getting a house that's 500 feet away from a water line, also they would have to build a very big water line and stuff to get fire pressure all the way back to a house that far away, because once you get that far away from the water line, in a fire hydrant, you have to put in a new hydrant. So there is some pressure loss that we've seen there before. And it's an interesting situation on Oakdale in that it is actually tapped into a 48-inch transmission line, so it is a giant water line. I mean, the City of Austin doesn't really give taps off of that water line anymore. So it's tapped into a very big water line. Like a 12-inch tap reduces to a 6-inch meter, a 6-inch backflow that has like a 4-inch vortex on it, and then it becomes an 8-inch water line on Oakdale. Many of you were probably here probably about 10 years ago when they actually upgraded that line to the 8-inch line on Oakdale. But the backflow and stuff was not replaced at that time. We knew, though, that we believe there is an issue with that the pressure could be reduced slightly because of that backflow on Oakdale. Doesn't seem like the valve closes completely, and it has a sound, what we call cavitation, and if you don't know what that is, it's water should flow through a pipe pretty smoothly. If it has cavitation, the water's kind of bouncing around the pipe inside the pump, or in this case, the backflow, and that's not a good thing. So it doesn't have a uniform flow to it. So we're looking at pricing to replace or repair that valve. The problem that we're running into with the valve is that it's a very old assembly, and it's been very hard to find parts to just put in that valve or even retrofit into that space. So we're also looking at the option of replacement. So there's two options there we're looking at, and that is to replace it with a 6-inch backflow assembly in the existing vault, or to go ahead and upsize it to the 8-inch backflow that matches the size of the line. So we're looking at those numbers and putting that together to see if that kind of addresses any of those issues regarding how much water is being pressurized through that line and if we're getting good flow through that line. It would directly affect 6405 Brody and anything that would happen in the future off of that line as well. So we are working on that. Regarding 6405 Brody, we are making plans to have ourselves, our engineers, their engineers, and everybody kind of get together to discuss this fire flow issue, to see if there's a modeling issue, if there's some other things that need to be done. Regardless, we will need to look at that backflow and do a replacement, or if we can find the parts to actually do a repair on that backflow. So we're working on getting those prices right now to see how much it's going to cost, what our path forward is to replace and or repair that backflow, but we're still working out that information at this time. Is there any questions regarding that particular item?
Councilor Reeds?
So I'm unclear, do we have wildfire fighting
Yes,
capabilities
according to
at
everything
this point?
we have fire flow all the way down to the end of Oakdale.
Okay.
Yeah. Everything the hydrants have always passed their test and things like that. And one of the things that I think may be the issue with the calculations that they had from Austin Fire is that we had upgraded all our hydrants probably with the project we did, and I'm not sure if there's a coefficient that is associated with those hydrants, and Austin Fire was using the lower coefficient than what these hydrants are rated. So I think that's why they're coming up with lower numbers on their model, basically.
Councilor Rose again?
Do you know why the backflow assembly valve was not replaced at the time?
I am betting because that would require you to turn the water off to Oakdale. So one of the things we're looking at as part of this, and Gary and I had discussed it yesterday, was finding a way to do a jumper around the backflow as a temporary solution to keep water flowing on Oakdale while we replace the backflow. Because that is the Oakdale's only source of water. If we take that out, they will be without water. So I'm assuming that is, unless you have some other information from council's past, but that would be my guess.
No.
Is that because it's going to take probably a day or two to pull it out, and so I think we're gonna find a jumper solution that I think will work.
Okay.
And the final item I wanted to address was regarding the summer youth program. So we've closed out our 2023 season. We've had 14 teens, 3 interns that worked on a variety of projects around the city. We put several pictures in there of the kids doing different projects. So they stay in the pergola and fix the swings, rebuilt the trellis. They did irrigation things, helped with cleaning out meter bots. Even though they are not allowed to actually use a chainsaw, they were taught how to maintain a chainsaw. And so there's just a lot of pictures of all the things the kids did this summer. They did a lot of work, and it was a really good crew of kids kind of to have around and help with different projects around the city. So I'm going to turn it over to Dakota for a CIP update.
Good evening. Just like to inform you guys on the whole project that we have going on right now. So the water line for Sunset is 100% complete, other than some revegetation that needs to happen. So everybody on Sunset is on the new water line. Lone Oak is also 100% complete, as well as the jumper from Curly Mesquite to Lone Oak. And then now AISD is now on Sunset Valley Water as of today. There's some stuff we have to go back in probably on a Saturday to finish up some of that work. And they started the sewer line over by the hotel. And everything seems to be going really smoothly. And it's on schedule to finish earlier than we thought, so.
Mayor Pro Tem?
My question is actually about the, the farmer's market electricity. Is that turned on now?
Yeah, it's fully functional. now.
Okay, cool. I'm not sure like when that came in, but I saw it when reading. Also, I think it was like the day after the last council meeting that I was at, which was in June. The fencing came down at the car chargers over on Brody. Did that get turned on as well?
Ooh, that I do not know. Yes.
I think they are now full. They are operational. Yeah, they had a. It's been a long
I've
process
seen
with
plenty
them,
of
but they
cars over
had.
there.
Yeah, they had change in contract. They had a whole lot of things, but I believe that project is closed out, and the second set of the EV Go are now operational.
Yeah, I remember asking about it, and then like the next day I drove by and the fence was down, so it's like I had to wait one more day. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Medicus?
I just had a question about the turnaround on Live Oak. Oh, it's been a long week. Lone Oak. Is that going to get paved when we do the road, or?
Yeah, it's all going to be paved together. So they're still working on. They're going to put some more road base in there, and then the whole street, all of Lone Oak will get repaved, and all of Sunset will get repaved.
Okay.
And Jones will get a couple patches worked in there. Right now, it might be a little rough, but they're going to actually smooth those out so they're not a speed bump.
Okay, thanks.
And we are proposing Jones to get a full mill and overlay next year.
Any other questions for Public Works? I just want to also say thanks for the summer youth program. I thought it was great to see so much participation after, I know the last few years, obviously we haven't had the program, or it's been very limited. But it was good to see all the projects that everybody worked on, including tearing down the old electrical panel. Yeah, or chainsaws, that's the other. But it seemed like a really robust program this year, and hopefully that leads to, continuation in the coming years. So, all right, moving on to public safety.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Matt stated earlier that we're having to postpone the summer crime camp, regretfully. We had two events going on that day. An in-service fingerprinting class that a bunch of agencies were coming to Sunset Valley to do, along with the kids' summer crime camp. Our air conditioner in our training room isn't working right now. Should be fixed by then, but today we had to confirm yesterday with one of the guests that's going to present, coming in from out of town, and didn't want to take the chance of having them come here to present and then have nowhere to present, because we can't move the kids into City Hall because the practical portion of the fingerprinting will take place in City Hall that day. So we're going to postpone it to probably close to the holidays. We'll be able to make it bigger by then anyway. So it's postponed, but it'll come back bigger and better, I'm sure. At the last council meeting, I mentioned that we had several complaints about transients and transient activity over in Old Town. We've identified two groups of people that, we've repeatedly had to speak to about camping in the park north of Jones and Westgate, and in the park on Sunset Trail. We finally got the word across to them. I think they won't be back. We also had two cyclists who were repeat offenders. We were getting complaints about multiple cyclists on the trail. It looks like it's just these two guys. They were getting multiple complaints about the same two people. We've spoken to both of them for last week, and then Monday we went throughout the whole trails. No camping activity. We followed a couple of trails of trash, but we didn't find any camps. So far, for the first time this summer, we can say that there are no camps on the trail, and we've gotten to the problem of some of the activity over in Old Town.
Mayor Pro Tem?
So it's listed here as Mopac campsite clearing, so that's behind specs Is that where that one was?
That was the after effects of that, I'm sure, and that camp being cleared out. We're still getting fallout from that. There's a lot of people who don't know that you can't panhandle here in Sunset Valley
Yeah.
and things like that. And,
So when was that cleared out?
it's been about 3-4 weeks now.
Okay. Chief Carter, he put this on kind of public safety's radar, and he's like, they're going to clear that one out. And I'm like, how do you know this? And he said, well, the people in the camp told him, which I think is fascinating. Like, they know, so they're connected in somehow. But do we know, because it was the one on Westgate, and then when that one got cleared out, that's when the Specs one got bigger. Do we know where they are now? I'm guessing it's behind Joe Coisen's place, or, at the end of.
No, across Mopac. That's where they've moved across Mopac, down from the New Violet Crown extension, not in this area, but across Mopac.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And we are gearing up for school. We're still trying to get a sign placed on Jones before school starts. We may get it about the second week of school. We're meeting hopefully this week with the new PTA president to hear some of her concerns that they have about the school. We're not the primary agency for Sunset Valley Elementary, but we spend quite a bit of time there, and we try to stay aware of what the issues are there. But we will be prepared for the new school year, and hopefully we will have the speed radar signs and the no left turn during school hour sign within the first few weeks of school. But we'll speak to the PTA and try to get the word out that it's coming if we don't have them in place before school.
Are there any changes to their proposed traffic flow this year, or is it going to be the same as last year?
I believe so. We'll find that out probably this week as well.
Any other questions for public safety? All right. One other thing I wanted to highlight is that, because it'll happen before our next council meeting, is we do have the bodies race on the Sunday, August 13th, which was in that morning. There's going to be some disruption for Jones Road and Ernest Robles Way, but it should be cleared up, I think, by 11, 12 o'clock that day, probably earlier, just based on some of the previous experience. But just for folks who are maybe listening in, or just be aware of that disruption will happen on that Sunday morning. So.
And our officers will be there to escort any cars that need to go through, so no one will be delayed for more than the time it takes to find a break in the run.
All right. Thank you, staff. We're going to move on to item number 4, council consideration of agenda items for approval on consent. And as I mentioned, I'm pulling 7 for an update from the city administrator. Councilmember Rosengarten.
I move to approve on consent agenda item number 5 with corrections in the motion wording, and number 6 as recommended by Budget and Finance.
All right. Anybody want to pull either of those items? Is there a second to approve on consent item number 5 with the corrections as submitted by Councilmember Rosengarten? Okay. And number 6 as recommended by the Budget and Finance Committee?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right, we approved on consent the minutes from the July 18th, 2023 regular meeting and work session. And item number 6, we approval of the April 2023 financial statements as recommended by the Budget and Finance Committee. All right, that'll take us to agenda item number 7. Consider an act on approval of amendments to sections 3.08, 13.01, 13.05, and 16.02 of the Human Resources Policy Manual regarding background checks, holidays, and wage garnishment. And we'll start with the city administrator giving us an update.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we just wanted to pull this item from consent, specifically regarding section 16.02, which is the adding the language regarding wage garnishment. One of our city attorneys, Darren Henry, had reviewed it, but upon further review, as a bit of background, City Attorney Barbara Bulwer-Wells, she was conferring with both the accounting manager, who is over HR, Kyle, and also Barbara Wilson, who has been providing, she has extensive background in HR, so she's been providing HR support to Kyle. They were working on a form because there's, beyond just the policy regarding garnishing wages related to theft or loss of property, there's also, you have to have a form, and it has to follow, federal wage guidelines. So we're just going to pull that because they're still working on finalizing that form. There's also going to be a larger overhaul of our HR policy manual. Barbara Wilson is assisting Kyle through this process. It's going to be a lengthy process. I just talked to Kyle. He said, don't put a time on it. But some of the larger things that we need to address are in the HR policy manual, there's a category of employee called non-regular part-time. It's really not a legal classification of an employee. So in changing that makes a lot of other changes to the manual. So that's going to take time, but we're doing that in-house. Our city attorney, and we can also reach out to TML too for support. Our recommendation is just to pull the amendment to 16.02. That will return at a later date once that wage garnishment form is fully baked, and to move forward with the section 3.08, which is adding the mandatory background checks for all employees, and that the title of that section will now be evaluations and pre-employment requirements. And then the amendments to section 13, both 1301 and 1305 regarding holidays, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about those proposed amendments.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I just had a couple questions. 1305, we're keeping the floating and adding a personal, right?
Keeping the personal, which is what, I always thought it was referred to, but in the policy it was actually called a floating holiday, but staff we all called it, oh, it's your personal day.
Yeah.
And so now it will just be labeled in the HR manual as a personal holiday that, the staff member can elect when they take that holiday. And then the floating holiday becomes, the floating holiday is replacing December 26th, which was an official city holiday, and that is being replaced by a floating holiday to be determined at the beginning of the fiscal year by the city administrator.
Okay, it's like non-personal floating holiday. That seems to, where is that listed now? I saw like a list of holidays.
So here's the listed paid holidays, and then the floating holiday is not on that list. I guess we could add it to the list, but there's not a specific date tied to it. It is in the section right down here where it says, a floating holiday is paid day off, which is subject to the city holiday policy, same as the above. And then and then right above it, official paid holidays shall include one floating holiday to be determined by the city administrator at the beginning of the fiscal year.
I just kind of couldn't figure out where it went to, so I'm fine. I don't care. I don't mind if anyone else wants to add it.
It's adding, because we're also adding Juneteenth, it's adding one additional paid holiday to our total paid holidays.
The next thing I wanted to ask about is the background checks. Mm-hmm. So we do background checks, and what we're going to do.
We're going to make that a mandatory part of the hiring process. So it was always done with PD. They have their own rules and regulations regarding hiring. I know it's been done in the past, for example, for employees related to finance. Yeah. But I know it's also not been done across the board for every employee, and we just want that to be done. We have the capability to do that, so we think it's, we have the capability to do that in-house, so we think that's just a good check mark as a part of our hiring process.
What is and this is what I couldn't find, is what is a disqualifying, what would be in the criminal background check that is a disqualifying kind of thing. Like some of them are obvious, like,
Right.
working with finance, maybe.
Right.
But if you're going to be if you're going to be a tech or something. So it seems like that should be maybe more defined, like what are the parameters? Like I'm kind of,
Right.
the term.
That,
like,
that could be expanded on in the manual. It's currently not. But I mean, I would think it would be determined by whoever is hiring, so that the appropriate department head, if it's a public works employee, if it's an administrative employee, if it's a police employee, it would be determined by one of these, and one of those three positions is who would be doing the hiring.
Yeah.
Unless it's a department head, and then it's council.
It's like, it's a wider problem, and we've been in the last couple of years a different labor market that I think a lot of things that you might have done like when you were younger that show up on a background check, they're like, we don't care, we need people to do the work. But I wonder what the barometer for, like, this is probably something that we don't want, someone working at our city, but I don't know, I'm big on second chances and stuff like that, so maybe Chief has more insight into what are the bad ones.
I would, even in law enforcement, the criteria, I mean, it's being a lot more lenient than it used to be, but it's going to be violent offenses, if it's financial crimes, if it's a position dealing with that, if you're going to be around residents or the public, there's a kind of an understood group of offenses that people probably would be concerned about. But I don't think that we would want to say if you've been convicted of this per se, we don't want you. It'd probably be made on an individual basis, other than those things that by law require you to register or do things like that people would have concerns about you being on their property.
So I think you said you're going to do a larger overhaul of this. So maybe when it comes to that, then kind of think about what we want to include. I don't know. That was it. Thank you.
Other questions from council? I think one thing that it would probably be useful is including that in the table so it's clear, the floating holiday, just as a, you can list it in both places, but I would just say floating holiday.
Maybe at the bottom, and then just put to be determined at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Any further discussion on this? Any other questions? Anybody wish to propose a motion? Councilmember Rosengarten?
I always like to ask what caused a situation to where this was worked on and was brought forward.
For the background checks?
So, no, I don't need to know about them. But why are we adding another holiday, moving a floating holiday? And I heard you. It was because of what happened July 4th, and it was on a Tuesday, and so if you had the choice of having a floating holiday, you could have made July 3rd a holiday so people could have had a 4-day weekend, I understand. But then what if one employee wanted that extra holiday December 25th, 26th, versus you make the decision the first of the year that it's July 3rd? What happens then?
Yeah,
It's
there
all
could
the
be
same?
there could be conflict, but I've just seen it so many years where we've had to move that December 26th holiday anyways because of how the Christmas holiday will fall. So if Christmas is over a weekend or something, that I've just seen it many years where December 26th ends up not being a holiday and we end up taking the 24th off instead, just depending on. So I think the floating holiday just gives a little more flexibility to selecting
On the
when holidays-
24th of December and the 24th of November, do you ever let staff, I realize you're still new in the position, does staff ever get off early on the 24th?
Yes, sometimes, and that, of course, we have to check in with the mayor. And this year, for July 3rd, we did, the mayor and I coordinated on having a very, skeleton crew, essentially, on Monday, July 3rd. We let pretty much all administrative staff work from home, or, we let anyone take the day off if they wanted to. So, but that has to be, coordinated between the city administrator and the mayor ultimately. But in order to declare something a holiday, the mayor and I couldn't just say, oh, July 3rd is a holiday. That council has to approve a paid holiday.
Okay.
So I think the floating holiday just gives us more flexibility to shape the holidays at the beginning of the fiscal year. And I think a lot of times, because of the calendar, that floating holiday will be around the Christmas holiday. That's generally probably when it will be, either Christmas Eve, the day after Christmas, just depending on the year.
But it has to be, everybody's on the same floating holiday. You can't have it all over the place because I can imagine it's an accounting nightmare trying to figure that out.
Right, no, yeah, so the floating holiday that's declared at the beginning of the fiscal year. This other day, which used to be called floating holiday, personal day, that is taken by the employee. They choose when that personal holiday is, and they have to indicate that to their supervisor. I'm using my personal day for this day off.
Okay, thank you.
And they have to use that within the fiscal year. It resets every fiscal year.
Sure. And I like the idea of getting compensated if an employee took something from city.
Councilor Reeds?
Do you have any data on what other cities do for their holidays? Does this match what most cities in our area do?
I didn't look specifically at every other city, so I did look at City of Austin, and they have all these days off. A lot of cities will also have Veterans Day off. We've never offered Veterans Day. As the mayor and I were talking, we wanted to add Juneteenth. It's not only a state holiday, it's been a state holiday for a while. It was also recently made a federal holiday as well, and does have ties to Texas, so that was chosen. But yeah, there are other cities that have this many or more holidays. There are cities that have Veterans Day off, which we do not.
Okay, so this is consistent then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Because this makes the number, let me confirm, 12 total holidays, which is consistent with other cities.
I cannot make a motion, so and it can be any motion you guys like. Councilmember Rosengard.
I pulled up Rollingwood days off. They have Columbus Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving holiday, Christmas holiday, New Year's holiday, Martin Luther King Day, President's Day, Texas Independence Day, 4th of July, Good Friday, Memorial Day, Juneteenth, Independence Holiday, and Labor Day. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I'm going to stop when it says 12. 12. All right, go ahead.
Councilmember, we will bring back the wage garnishment. We just want that to be fully fleshed out and make sure that the form that Kyle and Barbara and legal are working on matches the policy and the policy matches the form. So that'll come back.
Well, I just wanted to clarify where we're
Yes.
going here, because
Yeah, so I guess the recommended would be to approve amendments to section 3.08, 13.01 as amended with adding the floating holiday to the chart, and 13.05.
13.08, is that the background?
Sorry, 3.08 background checks, 13.01 and 13.05 holidays with adding the floating holiday to the table.
So I had a question then on the thing Councilmember Johnson brought up about when you do a background check, what would be the things that would what we would say, if this shows up, you're not eligible for employment? I think that's what you were saying.
Well,
Are we
I
waiting
would
to
want
put
to
that in the?
yeah, I would want to confirm more with the department heads and legal, but I think if we did add anything, it would be, you know, the background check would be reviewed by the appropriate department head making the hiring decision. I don't think we want to add, you know, specific
So my question
disqualifying.
is then, would that go in the manual updates and not here?
So this is the HR policy manual. So it's adding, oh, I'm sorry. So it's just adding one line saying, and I can pull up the old, I believe it said, you know, may perform a background check. This is will require a complete background check. It does not have any proposed language about then what to do with that background check. That's still left to the discretion of the hiring department.
Okay, all right, I'm ready. You wanna?
I can do it.
Go ahead.
All right, I'll do it. I was gonna make a motion. I'm so rusty. I feel like we're all kind of firing on about 2 cylinders here, up here. You're doing great though. We approve amendments to sections 3.08, 13.01, 13.05, with adding floating holiday to the table of the Human Resources Policy Manual regarding background checks, holidays, and wage garnishment.
Just not the wage garnishment.
Yeah, strike the wage garnishment. Sorry.
What about 16.02?
Resources Policy Manual regarding background checks and holidays. Is there a second for that? Councilmember Young? All right, any further discussion on this item? Councilmember Rosengart?
Maybe I missed it, 1602?
That is the
That's
wage
the one-
garnishment. That's the one
okay.
that we're
That's
going to
the
need
one
to
we're
bring
not
back
doing, okay.
after legal review.
I heard you say something, but I wasn't.
And also just double check that any members of the public that wish to speak to this item may do so at this time. We'll go ahead and move to our voting. So all those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. All right, motion passes. All right, we're going to be moving on to agenda item number 8, presentation, discussion, and possible action on request from Alba Terra Land Company, LLC, regarding the proposed Botanical Garden Cafe and Eatery project at 6405 Brody Lane. And there's 2 parts to this. One is granting an extension until October 31st, 2023 for the recording of the final plot that we approved back in December of 2022. And consider approval of a resolution directing staff to enter negotiations with Alba Terra Land Company LLC regarding city cost participation in a water line extension. And I think we'll start with City Administrator wanting to make an update or introduction to this item.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yes, just as a reminder, as the mayor said, the plat, which is tied to this item, the plat was approved by City Council on December 8th of last year. We've given 2 extensions for filing the plat related to the fiscal surety of the water line improvement. And so that is part A of this item, and staff and legal are recommending that we go ahead and move forward and approve that as is. And then for B, after conferring with the city attorney, we are recommending that we move into executive session under the Texas Government Code 551071 for consultation with the city attorney, just to discuss options and constraints related to cost participation agreements. So, we're recommending, going ahead and approving the extension and moving into executive session to discuss B, which is the cost participation agreement. And I don't know if the applicants have anything that they want to say to address council now.
Address council at this time.
Green is on, right? Okay. So I'm Tom Tribbiani, co-managing manager of Alba Terra Land Co., which is the developer of the Botanical Garden Cafe and Eatery at 6405 Brody. My son and partner is the other manager. Before you vote, and hopefully you'll pass that, I want you to understand where we're at. So we've been at this, I think many of you were on the council, I think it's 25 months, 26 months. And some of the extensions where we were waiting for TCEQ's approval, we finally got actually as far as the entitlements. The recording of the final plat is the last piece, but in order to do that, we have to problem solve the water issue, which has really been the bane of this development, both from a cost standpoint and from a timing standpoint. And so Gary McIntosh, who's a dear friend of Betty Grubbs, and is actually the executor of her estate, is here tonight. And every time we got an extension to problem solve, whether it was TCUQ or now this water line extension issue, we've gone back to Gary, and Gary's been gracious enough to extend our contract. So we don't own the land now. We have a very healthy earnest deposit, which will go hard as soon as we figure out the water line extension and how do we get adequate water flow and pressure to the site, and then hopefully the cost participation. So those two items are different. So what we're asking for is an extension. Currently, we'd have to have this all problem solved by the end of this month. And talking with staff, it doesn't seem that's reasonable just because of the lead time. But I guess I would like to encourage, and I know we're committed, and from conversations we had with the city staff today, I believe they're committed to sitting down and starting. Tammy Meagle, our civil engineer, is on vacation, or she would be here. We've confirmed she will be back in town next week, and so Carolyn, Matt, we'll be trying to set up a meeting, get our engineers with your engineers, clear up any confusions, and let's problem solve this so we can move this project forward. And so everyone thought that the October date would be a realistic date, that could be problem solved. And so I just want everyone to understand what we're requesting is really just tied to solving this water issue. So I'm hoping that all of us can work, because time kills deals. We've had interest rates move from 4%. Last week, our interest rate went from 7 to 7.25% because the Fed raised interest rates. And our construction costs, unfortunately, we live in Austin, or near Austin, and construction costs are not coming down. And so we're battling all that. So time is of the essence, and so our request, and I don't know, Mayor, if you want to deal with them one at a time, but as far as the extension, we're hoping you will appreciate it, because without getting water to the site, there is no development. And we can't really be following a final plat, which is the last piece. We have 100% construction documents that are being reviewed by the company that has. We have a lender that went to a committee and have a loan commitment. You know, unfortunately, their interest rate keeps rising. So we're like ready to go if we can pull these last couple pieces together. So we appreciate your consideration of granting extension to October, and then let's all work really hard to make sure we get that done so that we can close on the land and move this project forward. Thank you.
So council, we can proceed with either a motion to approve the extension before we go into executive session, or go into executive session and come back and vote, you know, or have motions after that. You know, certainly from my perspective, this is obviously a project that we want to see move forward if we can. Right? It's something that I think the city would be, you know, there's value in this, and certainly from a sales tax revenue standpoint, we would appreciate what that would bring to the city as well. However, we do want to have a conversation with legal and with staff just to make sure that we're understanding what potential constraints or, you know, pathways that we have going forward. Councilmember Rosengarten?
I move to grant an extension to October 31st, 2023.
Is there a second for that motion?
I will second.
Is there discussion on that portion of the agenda item for that motion? All those in favor of granting, oh, sorry.
May I ask one question? Yeah. Is that enough time, or do we need to say November?
I believe that is enough time. The time really is of the essence, so we
Right.
really need to make this
Right.
happen by October 31st.
Okay.
So we don't, we discuss that, do we need to give more time? It's like, well, we really need to resolve these issues by that date.
Okay.
And that's for them, so.
Mayor Potem?
And that's just for the decision to be made, not the actual work, right?
Yeah, and it's for it's related to the purchase of the land.
So for us to know that we have adequate water flow, the work has to be done so the test can be performed.
Okay, so
that
this
our
is,
engineer can get the numbers and she can do her calculations for the pressure loss over that distance. So that's why the October 31st came around because we understand you have September to do your budget. Those funds don't become available until October. So a best case scenario is that the pricing is being done and being worked on, and then assuming this all gets approved, someone's ready to do the work in October, the work's completed in October, we can get those tests in October, and then we know we're okay. The good news is I'm not an engineer, I'm not gonna pretend to be, but from what I understand at a very high level is that the meter on Oakdale, that number is calculating at like 1580, which is good for the fire flow. Other meters that tap into that transmission main are flowing, and I'm not sure exactly, so if I say something totally off base, but I think it's flowing at like 1,000 more than that, like 2,000 plus. So it should be similar. It shouldn't be such a difference. So the hope is that this is the fix that needs to happen, and if those flow numbers are what they are everywhere else in the city, it's going to solve this problem. So, but we do need to know, and the staff can't guarantee it, no one can guarantee it, the work has to be done. Yeah, you got to do the work and got to do the test and get the numbers. So so it's more than just like passing a budget because the work has to be done. So does that make sense?
Well, if indeed we're hopeful this meeting. Yeah, we don't want to do too much hypotheticals here regarding the backflow issue because we want our engineer, the city engineer, city staff, and their engineer to be in the so we're all on the same page. Maybe if they're using a different coefficient, maybe the fire flow is adequate. So we'll start there and then proceed with potential fixes.
Yeah.
So
whatever the solution or the avenue to get to the solution, that's great. And the sooner the better. What concerns me is like if we go down a dead end and we waste time going down a dead end instead of looking at multiple pathways to a solution. So it's like, to me, it's like whatever the dual tracks or the multiple tracks that we can run simultaneously, the better and the safer to ensure that this gets done. So that's kind of where my head's at.
So Councilor Reeds, just to clarify, I've directed staff to, as quickly as possible, make sure that we have the complete understanding of the issue. And that, of course, is going to require, first of all, meeting with the engineers and determining if this is something that, there is truly an issue there. Then, at the same time, we're investigating, what are the remediations that we can do for potential resolution so that we have that information to bring back to council. If it is something that we're doing a replacement, or a simple repair, that's something that probably falls within this time frame. If we're doing a complete replacement of that vault and that system, that is likely need to go out for bids because it'll trigger the need to go above our, and that will take longer than October 31st. So we're looking at a spectrum. If we wanted to be conservative, we could approve an extension for longer. However, the developer is also, needs a timely decision. And if we have to replace that whole vault, we're not going to be done with that for within 2 months. So that's the quandary that we're currently at. We have to determine what the issue is, but if it comes down to the worst case scenario, that's not something that we're going to have resolved by October 31st. And that's.
So when will the work from staff actually begin? Will that begin on October 1st, or will that begin tomorrow? Or
Again, there's unknowns. We have to know exactly how we're going to resolve the problem. If it's simply replacing the valve, it's probably something that can be done quicker, assuming we can order the parts. So we are still waiting on variables back from pricing, trying to either find the parts or getting pricing on how much will it take to replace the backflow.
So is there work, again, my question, is there work starting now on this
Yes,
process,
so
or is it
we're already,
waiting?
yeah, we're already engaging with the contractor to see how much it would cost to, as Matt said, repair if it's possible, or what those costs for replacement would be. Once we get an idea of how much that costs, if it does trigger competitive bids, then we would have to go through that process at some point.
What's-
And plan, if we do have to replace and water has to be, shut off, we have to do proper, notice. We have to have, as Carolyn was mentioning earlier, the alternative water source for
Yeah.
Oakdale.
Yeah, and that's the main thing that we would have to address probably first, is because we know it's gonna take a little bit of time to pull that out and replace it. We need to be able to make sure we have that jumper kind of plan in place and how we're gonna provide water to Oakdale in the interim while we do that replacement. Because there's not a ton of room over there. I mean, there's a lot of utilities in the ground, so it would ideally probably be to replace in its place versus trying to finagle it into a different location. So we are starting to work on trying to get those prices back. I think the estimator for the contractor should be back later this week, so we should be able to hopefully get prices on that. But the main thing is that we need to sit down with their engineer, see what it is that numbers they're using, because from what, talking to Gary and stuff, if we're getting adequate flow at the end of Oakdale, we should be able to get adequate flow at the top of Oakdale.
Yeah,
So,
you would think.
I can address that. I had the same question for Tammy, because it's like, I was like, well, certainly if we're not getting enough pressure to ours, which is 700 feet, Oakdale's 3,000 feet, surely they're not. So is that the case? I had this question, like, how's it possible? Oakdale slopes 40 feet down. So you're getting gravity, which adds 16 PSI over that distance. I'm not an engineer, I'm gonna qualify that, but this is my conversation with Tammy, because I was like really confused, like, how the heck are they getting fire pressure and we're not? We're a horizontal, flat, we don't have that gravity working in our favor, so that's part of it. But and just something that I think we also should be sensitive to is Betty's estate, because time is also costly for her estate, because they're continuing to pay real estate taxes, continuing to pay maintenance for the grounds. So it's not only hurting. So I know everyone. I mean, we want to get this done. But I feel like we need to also speak on that side of it as well.
So, Carolyn, if you're researching options now and costs,
Right.
what's your best estimate? Wouldn't that have to come back to city council for approval?
yes, it will have to come back for council for approval to move forward with the repair.
And would that be able to be back here by the next council meeting?
I'm not sure. Yeah, well, I think it would depend on what it is. It would be, are we able to make a repair? Yeah, we could probably make that pretty quick, do a budget amendment and make that. Or are we building it into the FY24 budget, which we could still have something ready to move forward, but getting it constructed by October 31st, if we're having to do a replacement, that may be that's a difficult timeline. And there's one other option I'll probably have to ask Barbara and Gary about, but I think at this point, we need to get everybody in the room, because there are actual other options as well. So, and those have not been discussed or addressed at any point. So I think we need to get everybody in the room to kind of go over what is the menu of options that are here. I do think the backflow needs to be replaced, but as they mentioned, can I guarantee that that's going to be the panacea and fix everything? I can't actually guarantee that. But there are some other options that could actually work. So.
Yeah, and to speak to that, there's nothing that prevents us from prioritizing a budget amendment ahead of the budget to facilitate starting if there needs to be a repair or replacement. So we're not constrained by that, as long as that's the desire of the council. We can always, the proposed, where this could come from is, where we could look at that during the budget amendment time, so we don't necessarily have to wait.
I'm just thinking, okay, if it comes back at the end of, or the last meeting in August, then if work has to be done, that's a pretty aggressive timeline for government work Just saying.
Very aggressive timeline.
I don't know how realistic it is.
Well, but the other thing that to note is that if we grant an extension to October 31st with this, we can always work with the developer to say, here's the new updated information, and try to make sure that everybody's in sync, right? And if they need another extension, but based on progress, right, that's something we can always easily do as part of council as well. All right. Any further discussion on that motion? All those in favor of approving the extension to October 31st, 2023, say aye.
Aye.
All right. In council, I'd appreciate a motion to move into executive session for discussion of the second part.
What was
Motion, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering what the part of the code, but if you know it, go for it.
It's right here.
Oh,
if you want-
motion to go in executive session for item B in section 8.
For consultation with the city attorney pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071. Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're going to go move into executive session at this time, and we'll resume when we return, and we won't take any action until we resume. All right, we good? All right. All right, we're moving back into open session at 7:56 p.m. We certainly appreciate the applicants coming and meeting with us tonight. We are, as a council, obviously trying to get as complete a picture as possible in terms of all the factors that are involved, not only just for the issue as far as the request by the applicant for cost participation, but also the backflow and the potential remediation of that. We are asking that staff, as quickly as possible, bring us the information we need in order to make a decision. And with that, I would appreciate a motion from council to table this item for a date certain time of August 15th so that we can have this matter brought before us with additional information from staff regarding the potential issue with the backflow, as well as the options the city has for potential agreements with the applicant. With that, if there's a motion.
I move that we table the motion until August 15th, until we can further get more information as discussed.
Is there a second for the motion? Second from Councilmember Young. So I do want to emphasize that we are eager for staff to quickly
Yes.
Bring back this information. We know that time is of the essence for the applicant. We want to make sure that council takes our deliberations with the information that we need. We do need the additional time, but we are committed to bringing this back as quickly as possible. If we need to, for example, the August 15th, we do not don't have a complete picture. We are committed to also not waiting until the next council meeting and having a called meeting in order to work with the applicant so that we can continue to make progress on this. So I would just want to express that we're not necessarily just saying let's punt it off. We're trying to really make sure that we have those options so we can work with you. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, so staff, please work with the applicants. I know that we're scheduling meetings with their engineers. We're also going to continue to work with legal on potential options for us, and we will be bringing this back on the 15th with additional information. Great. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, if you don't mind, we do very much appreciate your consideration. We understand that there's a level of due diligence that you need to go through, and music to our ears to hear that an urgency is going to be addressed to this. So thank you very much. Very much appreciate that.
Thank you. All right, council, we're going to move to our last agenda item, which is presentation, discussion, and possible action on amendments to 9 job descriptions and/or titles, creation of a maintenance crew lead position, and adoption of a revised civilian pay scale effective with the new fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2023. And just as an introduction to this item, this is something that I've worked with the city administrator based on feedback that he has had in his year now in this position. These are changes I think that I would especially like to council to give us feedback on and potential consideration. With that, I'm going to hand it over to the city administrator for introduction to this item, as well as presentation of any any questions or answering any questions that council has.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so just to start out with, I'll clarify what exactly the action that you all will be taking is for this item, because there is a proposed org chart that will, the org chart is presented with the budget every year. And so the action tonight is not to approve that org chart. The action tonight is specifically to approve amendments to 9 job descriptions and/or titles. Not all job descriptions have title changes. The creation of a maintenance crew lead position, which is really basically reformatting. There was a maintenance technician 3, and it's really changing that to a maintenance crew lead. And then finally, an adoption of a revised civilian pay scale that would not be effective tonight. That would be effective with the fiscal year 24 that would begin on October 1st. So of the title changes, there are 6, and 3 are in the administration department, and 3 are in the public works department. And as far as the pay scale, the mayor and I worked on the pay scale. There were going to need to be revisions to the pay scale, even without these title changes and reclassifications, just based on where we were with cost of living increases. So last year, with this current budget, fiscal year 23, the Budget and Finance Committee worked with council on creating a stipend rather than a cost of living increase, although there was a COLA that was granted to staff as well, but there was also a stipend that was paid out quarterly, and that was tiered. So, you know, the lowest paid employees had a higher level of stipend. The mayor and I worked on building that stipend as a cost of living adjustment to the fiscal year 24 budget that has gone through Budget and Finance and has been recommended. So the pay scale, the revised civilian pay scale, takes into account those the stipend, the inflation stipend that will be a COLA potentially as a part of the fiscal year 24 budget, as well as addressing some of the reclassifications and title changes as presented. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I can go into more detail into why I'm proposing some of these changes, at least in administration. One thing I did, I'm sorry, I lost the connection here. Thought we solved this issue, my apologies. One thing I will say is that in this new proposed org chart, and since my tenure as city administrator, you know, we have not had an assistant city administrator position, which was my former position, and then was a position of the city for many years prior to 2019. I think that with these reclassifications, at least with the community coordinator becoming director of communications and engagement, and then the development services coordinator becoming the director of development services, these were 2 roles that were really merged into the assistant. If you look at the assistant city administrator position, those roles were really merged into one. And my argument is those are 2 very separate roles, 2 a very different set of skills and qualifications needed to perform each of those jobs to the best of their ability. And so that's why I'm proposing not to have an assistant city administrator, but rather to have a director of development services and a director of communications and engagement, even though those 2 do not have any direct reports. Yes.
Can I ask a real basic question here?
Yes.
What is the difference in job responsibilities between, for example, the accounting manager and the director of finance and HR?
So what are
Well, how does their job change?
their job, that job description is not changing much. We did elaborate on some of the HR-related duties that I felt were not captured in the current job description of accounting manager, because that role has been in charge of HR, working with the city administrator and legal, of course, but really the HR director has been the role of the accounting manager for many, many years. I just don't think that has been captured in the job description.
So, okay, so you are clarifying the role of
Yes.
the HR.
And in many other small cities, the head of their finance, their accountant, is called director of finance, and it's very rare to have also be over HR too. But
And I will tell you, I'm not a fan of HR being in accounting. And I will tell you, I have done HR and I've done accounting. And I will say that HR is not for the faint of heart.
No.
And it is something that will be ignored with someone who sits in an office behind a computer all day.
Right.
And I don't think it's a good fit I mean, there are a lot of administrative things in HR, but I think you miss all of the employee relations, you miss the culture, you miss performance management, you miss all of those things. And I don't think it's necessarily a good fit. I actually think a better fit is the communications director. I think that's probably a better fit because that person is a more active in all parts of the organizations. But
Right.
that's neither here nor there. In the job description, I noticed, in the finance job description, I just read that one, we don't even require an accounting degree. Has this been reviewed by Budget and Finance?
No.
No. So, you want me to pull, hang on, I'm sorry. No committees have reviewed it, and my long tenure with the city, I don't remember. I know there used to be the Budget, Finance, and Administrative Committee who might have looked at job descriptions, but,
Okay.
you know, per the HR
That's
policy
fine.
manual, it's the role of staff to develop them, city administrator to develop them, and then the mayor and council
And that's
to
fine,
approve.
that's fine. I just, I'm a little concerned with the requirements that we have, and is that to meet our present situation, or is that was just an omission? There's no true HR requirements in there. Minimum bachelor's degree. Bachelor's degree, it doesn't even, you could have a bachelor's degree in, you know, whatever.
I will be honest, I did not review the education and training for this specific position.
The other thing I don't think is captured in the HR part is talent management, recruiting, culture, management training, career progression. One of the major things that was always beat into me as an HR manager is one of the things they do is limit liability. And that is they are overseeing the organization, looking to make sure there are fair policies, the managers are trained, everything is being fair, there's no discrimination, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that requires a pretty active person in the organization. And I'm struggling with a finance person that when we can't get financial statements out, we're doing April, and we can't get financial statements out on a timely basis, how are we going to get problems resolved in the organization? So that is my concern. Recruiting, policies, supporting health and wellness, employee relations, and I'll tell you, if I'm in that position and I have a problem that, let's say I have a harassment problem or a bullying problem, or I need that accounting ledger to be fixed, what am I going to do first? I'm going to fix that accounting ledger. And maybe I'll get to that problem. So I am concerned that HR is being minimized in this. So I think this needs to be rewritten to capture some of the other requirements of HR in there. And the education needs to be upgraded. The other thing is, does this mean if we approve these job descriptions, and I'll just ask the basic question, that we come back with these, what are the financial implications, I guess, of this?
Right, so the main financial implications would be the pay, the civilian pay scale, right? So you're adopting a range that position could be paid, right? So there's a minimum and a maximum. Let me pull up the pay scale. You're not approving anyone's salary rate. That is approved with the budget.
And I don't know where we fit, where our current employees fit, if that job description changes to director positions, where do they fit into that pay scale? And I would have expected some sort of analysis that was given to us that would be part of the decision-making also.
So all of the positions and proposed reclassifications have been built into the FY24 budget. But
Well, we haven't approved that budget.
right.
So We haven't seen that.
Right. So do you approve the pay scale
But
first,
Budget
or
and
do you
Finance,
approve the?
Budget and Finance has seen those numbers.
Yes.
But we haven't.
Right. But this has been reviewed by Budget and Finance as far as what's being proposed for the salary increases or the maximum. So that there are no new beyond what Budget and Finance has been shown.
Correct.
For the upcoming fiscal year, as far as what the mayor's budget is going to include.
So those are, the only financial implications are the COLA that has been approved in the budget? That Budget and Finance has approved for the budget?
So what Budget and Finance has seen is a salary or a proposed COLA that is taking the existing stipend and applying that
And
to,
what is the COLA? What's the number?
it varies by employee, right? Because
varies by
it's
employee.
on the lower tiers, it's a higher increase, and that's what they're
Okay,
currently getting with their
okay,
stipend.
Okay, that's right.
And then there is a merit built into the budget numbers that Budget and Finance scenes of up to 5%
Okay,
across the aggregate, right?
Okay.
So that's been, both of those things have been seen by Budget and Finance. However, the merit is going to be based on individual performance evaluations.
I like that.
5% is the maximum that, for aggregate, that we will be using in our budget. Once we actually have the salary numbers, it'll either be that number or lower.
So just to provide some more background, we're currently undergoing performance evaluations. So performance evaluations are due, the department heads need to have them wrapped up and to my desk by August 15th. Now, Budget and Finance will not see those latest implications, but no one is going to, it's not going to increase, right? The salary numbers will not increase. They could only potentially decrease, but when we consider final adoption of the budget, we will have incorporated all of the proposed merit increases into the budget and or potential reclassifications.
So here you have the min to max here.
Yes.
So these are the actual implications.
Correct.
So the Director of Communications and Engagement would get a $7,000 increase to get to the minimum, correct? Is that how I read that?
Well, if they're not at the minimum, they will be at the, I believe that was one of the positions that might have been out of their range. There were several positions that would already be out of their range
Make that bigger.
by just implementing the COLA.
Can you make that bigger?
The stipend. You need it bigger?
Yes, please. So how can I tell, let's just take line number 7. How can I tell what the Director of Communications and Engagement currently makes? It's where they fit.
That's not a part of the pay scale. That's a separate.
I understand it's
just
a separate thing,
the
but
pay scale.
I want to know what the financial implications of changing
So-
all these job titles to director titles.
Okay, so would you like then just because that's what the mayor and I were working on, so do you want a separate data sheet? I can send it to you of what every employee's making and then what
No,
they
I don't want to know all
potentially.
that. What I want to know is the implication of changing job title names
Right.
to director names.
Okay.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like the responsibilities change with it. Correct?
No, responsibilities have changed because we're used to that position specifically, communications and engagement, community coordinator, reported to didn't even report to a department head, reported to the assistant city administrator, who the assistant city administrator was in charge of the website, was in charge, basically in charge of communication, and the community coordinator was just a support position. Now, this person reports directly to the city administrator, and who's in charge of the website? That's why I'm trying to clarify this with this.
Is she reporting to now?
Yes.
Who?
What?
Who is she reporting to
Me,
now?
the city administrator.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how does this change?
It's expanded job duties than before. Used to it reported to an assistant city administrator who wasn't even a department head. It was just more like almost not a clerical staff, but a support staff for the assistant city administrator with specific roles and duties. And now they're reporting directly to the city administrator and essentially running their own department. They are in charge of communications and engagement. A part of that is the website. We've also now added grant writing. We were looking to do that, have a consultant do grant writing, wanting to bring that in-house.
So,
Yeah.
So, I agree with Wanda. I mean, if we go back just a couple years, we had, I think, 3 staff members that were director and up. There was city administrator, chief of police, and then public works director. I feel like that was just like, and so now we're doubling the number of people that are.
A director does not mean that you're a department head. No way. So department heads are specific to the, department heads are specific to the organization that they are a department head. Just because someone is a director does not mean they're a department head.
Well, I'm less concerned with whether they're department head and, like, we're gonna immediately spend more money just to bring people up to those titles.
Correct.
Yes.
They were not necessarily. They were already going to have an increase based on.
So there was things that we had already agreed to, like raise wages, and so they just.
I'm trying to align the titles with what their job responsibilities are, truly are. Because their job responsibilities have changed with the reshifting of the organization and no longer having an assistant city administrator.
Okay, my other kind of idea on this was we're kind of like a small, we're getting bigger every day, but we're like a small city with small staff, and I think I made a point before, just seeing someone like you who like literally went from intern to everyone's boss, and it's kind of really cool how our city has managed to find the people and then give them more agency to thrive and really do whatever. So, if I look at these titles and the people that are currently in them, it does kind of make sense. I mean, we have some very senior people doing some very, and so it's not it's not so much like I think these titles would fit them, and yes, they're doing a lot for the city, and we've had to kind of come to terms with all the responsibilities that we're throwing on to staff. I do want to know how much money we're gonna be spending on it, because I just feel things are always getting more expensive, and I'm just like, when I just thought they would just naturally like stop going up eventually, and we're seeing kind of like we're seeing signs of kind of maybe inflation stuff going down, but in the 3 years I've done, how long have I been here? 3 years? I don't know. Like, we just keep on spending more money, and I'm like, maybe I'm the one who has to put the brakes on some of it. Sorry.
And to your point, Councilmember, so we also, yes, I think the city in the past, I've seen it so much, the city has created positions based on who's there, right? We had an accountant, just to your point, we had an accountant and a city secretary. Those are 2 totally different worlds that we combined together, and that person was so, overburdened by having those 2 job duties, combined, right? But we created that position for that person that was in there. So it's always tempting to do that, but I'm also, with these changes, trying to think about later recruitment to fill those positions for the city and to attract the talent that we need to, to essentially run these departments. Yeah, we're small, but we have a very active development department. We have a very cumbersome, land development code, and we've got a cumbersome development process, and we've got, we're tiny, but we have 3 huge, 3 huge shopping centers, right? So development is constantly happening. So you really need a qualified person. Yeah, they don't have any direct reports, but they are running the development department. It's a huge department. They're the permit clerk as well as presenting a zoning change to the zoning commission. Those are how do you marry those? Do you call them a coordinator or do you call them a director? The Director of Communications and Engagement, they're running the communications of the city. They're operating, you know, they're working with all city departments and all the committees we have. We have a, you know, we have a ton of committees. We have more committees than most, way more committees and commissions and boards than cities our size. And it takes a lot of work.
Or even some bigger, Westlake.
Even some bigger cities, yes. We have so many committees, boards, and commissions that all need support.
So, 3 things.
Yeah.
One, I agree with Councilmember Reitz about having our finance person be our HR person. Those are 2 different skill sets. I think we should look at, in the future, an alternative to that, because I think you pointed out all the reasons why this doesn't work very well. So I wanted to reiterate that. 2, to ask the question Councilmember Reitz was asking in a different way was, did you need to change the job titles to change the pay scales?
I'll answer that, no, you don't need to. You have to change the pay scales to keep up with the salary inflation.
Understood,
Right.
understood, but you didn't need to change the titles to change the pay scale.
No, that's, yeah, you could change
Okay.
the pay scales independent of the titles.
Okay, so when I looked at this, I was like, to me, this is like a kind of position inflation here. I think you have 2 positions that I would really call director positions, who also happen to be department heads, which is the chief of police and the director of public works. And my problem, having worked in other organizations where this kind of thing happened, was that position inflation led to salary inflation. Because someone said, I'm a director, you have to pay me more. So I have a problem with those 3 new director titles. I don't think they're accurate. To me, a director, at least in every organization I've ever worked in, a director is someone who has staff and is an administrator of that staff, as opposed to like what I am, which is I'm a high-level person in the organization, but I'm not a director because I don't have staff under me. I'm a technical resource for the whole organization, right? And my title is different because of that. And I think that applies to the Director of Development Service, or what you have for as a Director of Development Services, the person for communications and engagement, and your finance and HR person. Those titles just don't sit well with me.
I'm open to other titles, but I'm committed, I'll say this, I'm committed to the job descriptions. But
That's
I'm open
fair.
to other titles, but the job descriptions I'm committed to because that's what they're doing and
Right.
what the city needs.
And I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
But again, those 2 things aren't necessarily, the title and the job description aren't tied together any more than the title and the pay scale are tied together.
I remember a Cheers episode where Woody asked for a pay raise, and Rebecca says, come on, let's go talk about it in my office. And they went back in the office, and when they were done talking, he came out, he was so happy. And Sam asked him what happened, and he goes, I got a new title. I'm the director of the bar. Did you get a pay raise? No, but I'm director of the bar. Okay? That's to simply say, if we can do that, just give them a new title and save money, okay. Joking. So what I'm looking at is, we start with a maintenance crew lead, we go to a coordinator, we go to a supervisor, we go to a superintendent, and then you get to the director before you become a city administrator. So in a small city like us, you're all of those at any given time. I've seen Carolyn put tablecloths on tables. I've seen Matt do it. And this is a high-paying position for you to be putting tablecloths, but we all just pitch in. That's just what we do. And so when we say director and we're moving them to a grade up, which means dictating a higher pay grade, what happens to the person or the job description that came before the director? That job changes, goes away? When they were a supervisor and they go to a superintendent, is there no longer a job opening for a supervisor? When they go from coordinator to director, is there no longer a job opening for coordinator? Is there no longer a tech that can move up to being a coordinator? That's what I'm asking.
So the job, at least in the administration department, the proposed title changes, they do not lose any of the duties that they had prior. They still retain all of those, at least the DCE and the development. They're still doing the duties of a coordinator, clerical duties. On top of now they have more administrative duties. So it's just adding, it's really adding to their duties.
Okay.
So, I've already talked to Matt about this, so I'm just gonna say it from the dais too. I have a problem with all the directors' titles and the,
We have 3 of them.
yeah, going from a 6 to a 7 pay grade. And I thought we were fine with the coordinator. In some of the city examples that we've seen that were given to us, those cities, for example, for the communications person, those cities have much larger populations
Correct.
than we do. So I think the coordinator level is working, well, no, I take that back. I think those are good working titles. I don't think that, I think that for the communications person, we've made a lot of changes to that job description.
Totally
A lot
rewritten.
it's almost totally a different job description than the person that we have in the position applied for.
Yep.
And so I have a question about whether or not we change a job description that much. Are we covered? I'm from a national organization. You don't think about the staff, the individuals when you're doing a chart for job descriptions and for your structure. You think about what the needs of the organization are. And so, personalities aside, is this a brand new position because there's so many changes? And some of those things have been moved over to the development person, and all these additional ones are with the communications coordinator. And I have a concern that if we're going to make this big change, that before we would elevate this position to a director position, that we should see proof of concept that this new position actually fits and can be, whoever we have in that position can actually do the role. Because we're doing a big change, and then we're going to give a big title change and a big increase. And I've had several complaints from community members about the quality of that is produced by this particular individual in a position, and things have gotten better. I've talked to Matt about it a couple times. I've personally taken an interest in helping, but I think with all these changes and grant writing added to it, we need to see, if this is the right fit. And I don't think we need to have all the directors. I think we need coordinators. That's just my 2 cents.
Councilor Rosengard?
Add on, assistant city administrator. We had one previously, and then we got to prior to you, we realized that person really didn't function or need to be an assistant city administrator, more like an assistant to city administrator. So, it's my advice. Does the, and the next thing is, there's 2 people that I know that when you take vacation, you need someone to jump in and be the lead. When they jump in and take the lead as city administrator, does their pay scale change while they're working in your shoes? They're doing your function.
Right, no. Now, if I'm, incapacitated for a long, if they're going to be officially like designated by council, right, to be the interim, yes, then I know that you all and the mayor would consider a pay, but this is just, I'm on vacation.
Just oversee, just make sure if anything
who's
goes
coordinating council
left
requests.
that
Yes,
were.
yes. And I will address it. So there's proposed to have 2 positions, the current development services coordinator and then the public works director. I did speak with Chief, in all fairness and transparency, Chief, is this a role that you would like? And
He's smart.
Yeah, he said, no, thank you. And, you know, there is a time, though, and we've seen it, in case of emergency, the chief would take over. And I'm totally comfortable with that because he is qualified to do that. And I will, and Carolyn and the rest of staff will support him and however he needs to be our leader in time of emergency. But, you know, the mayor and I spoke, Carolyn, you know, Jerry, in the absence of the city administrator, really in coordinating council activity, right, and preparing you all to make decisions at a meeting. The difficult decisions, the tough items are generally related to development and infrastructure, and either the development services, whatever you want to call it, director, coordinator, administrator, whatever that title is, you know, they are going to be aware of what is going on in relation to any development related items. And then the same goes for the public works director also with development. You know, Carolyn, Jerry, and I work a lot together on development items. We have tons of meetings together, but also with decisions related to infrastructure. So I think those are those are the best two positions where in my absence, or the city administrator's absence, to designate as the stand-in city administrator to help coordinate development and or infrastructure activities.
And then, I think it was asked earlier, what really brought this on? You felt that some people were doing a job that wasn't classified per their job description. So you felt
Correct.
we needed to put the square peg in the square hole versus the square peg in the circle.
And thinking in the future, like, what does the city need? Like, if all of us are gone, all of us leave the city, you know, and this, you know, the city needs to move forward with all of the programs, all of the, you know, activities, all of the committees that we have, you know, what, and processes and laws, ordinances that we have, what is the best organizational structure of the city? I think it looks something like this, where you don't have an assistant, at least for the administration department, you don't have an assistant city administrator, but rather you have two individuals with, you know, specializations, one in communications and engagement, because we've heard, you know, multiple times how important, you know, the communication is, how connecting with our retail centers are, connecting with our residents, connecting with visitors. And then the flip side of that is development, and I think those should be separated out. Now, I'm not married to the director title. If we could, you know, administrator or supervise, you know, we could, maybe it is coordinator. I just worry about, you know, we were very fortunate with Jerry in that situation, but when we posted that job, you know, the other individuals that I interviewed just would not have been able, I don't think, to provide the level of service, right? So I think we need to have the job description and the title match the talent that we need to fill that need in those roles.
Thank you.
If we can come up with something other than director that you all are fine with and that I think matches the job description, then I'm amenable to that.
Okay.
Councilmember Medicus, and then Councilmember Reeds.
I forgot to mention, I also believe that the HR position, that's a very specialized type of position, and I don't think it should be combined with our finance director. If we did anything, maybe we should look at having either contract that out or look at having someone who has more skills in that, and I don't think it's in the job description for the communications coordinator either.
Just to comment on that before Councilmember Reeds, and that was something we discussed at our retreat to investigate separating those, right, and contracting out. And I know that staff did pursue discussions with at least the current, you know, group that manages our HR, and that's not really a service that they can provide. But if you want to elaborate more, just in terms of like what we did direct staff to see if we could contract that out.
Outsourcing and contracting HR really has more to do with the services that we're actually picking up with our enterprise-wide solution that we've gone with. You know, when you contract that out, it's more to do with payroll and kind of the onboarding process. It's all these things that are addressed by, you know, a system, right? And so hopefully with this new system in place, HR will become much easier. But I also see where you're coming from, Councilmember and Reeds and Young. Councilmember Young, you addressed it, that there are other, you know, non-kind of payroll, non-benefit related items related to HR that maybe we need to look more closely at, things like culture, things like liability, and fortunately, we have an administrative assistant who's, you know, paid 50% out of Public Works and 50% out of administration. That individual does have extensive HR experience and has been providing much needed HR support to Kyle, to the accounting manager. So that's why that's shown on the org chart,
Well,
as a little
just
dotted line.
just a question, because I know, Councilmember Reitz, you also have a lot of experience with HR. Are the things that you are identifying as job description requirements for an HR position, in your experience, is that something you can contract out for, or is that something that really has to be part of the organization because of the culture and the, you know, oversight of those things? And so if we're going down that route, we have to define where that resides in our organization. And we don't, for 20 years, we've kind of just gone by, you know, with one person, you know, having it on, but not really having a title, not really having that in their job description, you know, and it's continued that with our, you know, current finance, you know, manager. So
Yeah, I think when you contract it out, you are contracting out the administrative functions, and you're not contracting out all the other systems that are in place that, or I would say it's a different skill set, and you have to be really on site. And that is somewhat of a role of the city administrator also, to be that person, to function in that role if that is what needs to happen. And so, but I guess if that is the division where the finance manager gets the administrative functions, like the payroll functions, employee records, et cetera, then those fit very well into a financial type of function. And those other issues, the employee relations, the performance management, managing the culture, limiting liability, those become part of the city administrator's role, then that's an appropriate way to do it in a very small organization as we are. So I you know, if that answers your question. The second thing I wanted to say is I do support the move for the Public Works to move to that next level. The Public Works position handles all of our infrastructure and handles what we function, the major things we do as a city, and they are responsible for that. And that is something that I think should be at that level. So I would support that particular one. And then I would probably like to get a little bit of input into that finance and HR job description before, because I'm not okay with the educational requirements.
Okay.
And I think there are some things that, and I think that's a discussion that probably needs to happen, is some of those HR's responsibilities go to you, and are
Right.
those put in your job description?
Correct, yeah.
You know, and they may be in there, I don't know.
Yeah,
So,
I just looked up, there's a brief in the, you know, because I'm one of the codified positions. There's not many. Let's see here, has the most codified position in the Texas government code. But so there's like 5 aspects of the city administrator, and one, you know, there's financial management. One of them is personnel, city administrator. So it's supervising department head and other management personnel, and perform evaluations of department heads, and assist with the evaluation process of all employees. So evaluation kind of falls into my, you know, bailiwick. Administrative programs. So, you know, maybe that piece could be expanded on, and some of the human resources related duties we would want to move out of that finance position. I guess just to take the council's temperature, so if we didn't call the you know, the communications and the development services positions directors, what about the finance position? Because that person, that position does currently and probably will always have a direct report.
There is one more thing I wanted to add.
Oh,
I
yes.
forgot. When I think of a director position, I do think of someone who has many, many years' experience. And I do look at our development coordinator, and he definitely has the years of experience behind him. I don't necessarily see that in the finance position or the HR position. I believe HR is very new to him, and these are new responsibilities. And a director title it seems to be a bit elevated, so I would just keep it at manager. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay.
Councilmember Rosengard?
I'm looking at Rolling Wood job titles and so on. The person, Abel Campus, who is over finance at Rolling Wood, is called the Director of Finance. Now, mind you, he's been there for a long, long time. I want to say 20-some years.
Yeah, we reached out to Rolling Winter. They're like, yeah, we don't even have a job description for them. Ooh, putting them on
Yeah,
blast. But
and-
yeah, like, you know, they've
and
just
he
been
did
there for
40
so long.
years.
It's like, okay,
Yeah.
they have been running the show, so to speak, for that
Yeah,
long.
and he's
So,
served 40 years
Yeah.
in school district.
Yeah.
So knowing that, you know, this guy's qualified for the job, so he got Director of Finance. Now, I realize Kyle is very good numbers. He's detailed. I don't have to check the math anymore. I do one or two formulas and they come out. I'm like, oh gosh. So I understand that. But maybe it's too soon to call it director position yet? Just a thought.
yeah. Again, I think the hard part for me is, again, when we were designing and working on the organizational chart and working on the job descriptions, you do really need to separate out the position, but you know, you can't, you know, it's the reality. But
Yeah.
I just think for the future, for recruitment for the city, you know, I think what we call, you know, our staff is very important to attract the level of
Expertise that you want.
expertise that we need.
But then we're
yes.
starting up here versus starting here and
True.
working with them.
True.
Like with Kyle, I'm not going to put him here, but where we started with Kyle, and then, and I should never say someone's name, where we started with the accounting person, we move up to here, but now it's up here, so the next person, God forbid we lose our accounting manager, we start up here because the directing position demands it, that level of education, that level of expertise, that level of years of service versus someone here that can work their way up.
True. Yes. But that too is why the pay scale is important, because you have, you know, you can't then hire, you know, when we brought on board someone that took a very big pay cut to come, you know, and yeah, they retired, but you know, they had to fit within that pay scale.
Yep.
That
Yep, they
and they
knew
knew
what
that,
they were
you know,
getting
that
involved.
coming
Yeah.
on board. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Medicus?
So I do support, based on the level of responsibility of the finance department, that I do support calling that a director, and I also support Director of Public Works. The level of responsibility in both of those positions, I think is really critical, and they have people that they work with, they report to them. It's the other positions, the director positions, that I just am not really comfortable with. Perhaps the director for the one that has a lot of experience, potentially, but not all of them.
And may I say something about the org chart? So in this the version that, you know, you all received in the draft packet a few weeks ago, had the org chart was laid out differently. After meeting with Council Member Medicus, there was some confusion of, okay, who is the city administrator's direct report? So I reformatted it, bringing, you know, so now we have 6, and that's true, I have 6 direct reports. So again, these positions, they are not department heads, and a department head is, you know, that is, there's levels of that in our city ordinances, right? With hiring and firing. of what, my role is and what your role is. You all step in when it comes to department heads with the hiring and the firing. And so maybe, I do think, this org chart is still proposed, we're still working on it. There needs to be a clear distinction of who is a department head, because that also has implications related to the financial policies. So department heads have more authority, as the department head, right? They are in charge of their department budgets. Doesn't mean that these other positions don't have to follow policies and they have to keep up with budgets, but there are specific roles and responsibilities related specifically to department heads, Chief of Police and the Director of Public Works.
Councilmember Rosengart?
I would ask that we work on this some more and bring it back for another council meeting.
Sure. And I love feedback. Please contact me and offer your feedback, and be happy to work with you.
Carolyn?
I just wanted to address any of the public works positions because we haven't really spoken to them yet. So basically what we're looking at, we did some refinement on the maintenance technician job descriptions and maintenance technician 1 and 2. A few years ago, there was a step system that was initiated for the maintenance techs. I don't know if anybody remembers when that happened. And it wasn't really good. It has 2 problems mainly with it. At the lower levels of the STEP program, it created an anticipation and an expectation that no matter how you were performing, if you reach this step, then you get a raise. And so that was happening at the lower levels, and then to get up to the upper levels was something that would probably never be achieved by a maintenance tech. It was requiring like a Class B water license, and if you've got a Class B water license, you're not a maintenance tech. And so it was like, it was creating this dichotomy and stuff. And so we don't want to have that anymore. So maintenance tech 1, you enter in at something, and then if you are performing well after probation, you get a 3% raise, basically like that. Maintenance tech 2 is that step up. They have a little more experience. Maybe they've been here longer, or they are somebody coming from a different organization that has a good amount of experience coming in. Similarly, it's basically kind of creating those steps in there for the maintenance techs. Maintenance techs 1, maintenance techs 2. And then if you come in with a lot more experience, maybe you come in as that maintenance crew lead, or you get promoted into that position over time. We don't have anybody there at this time, but we want to make sure that there is a path forward for people if they want to continue moving forward with that. So those are those 3 kind of positions there. The utility superintendent, oddly enough, 2 years ago, that was the title of this position. Not sure why it was changed exactly, but we looked at just trying to turn that title back to what it was 2 years ago. Similarly, right now, that position, Parks and Grounds, they're on the same kind of level, basically. Having utility superintendent, Parks and Grounds superintendent, these are individuals who are over those kind of sections and kind of oversee all of that work. Right now, the Parks and Grounds superintendent's title is land management supervisor, which is kind of a weird title, and I don't think we'd ever find anybody. You're not going to find a land management supervisor to compare to in some other place. So there's those 2 kind of, and those just represent just little title switches so that they're more fitting to what these individuals are doing, and to what we can compare them to in other cities as well, because they just don't, like, the one doesn't exist anywhere. Assistant Director of Public Works, oddly enough, so about 10 years ago, Public Works did have assistant director positions. It's not something new. It's happened in its positions that were in the past. Some of you may remember Tom Breitkreitz. We had another gentleman afterwards, Scott, who came in, and they were assistant directors of Public Works. And so this is another title change. We have the Public Works Superintendent, which was a new position. And so changing it to assistant director, allowing for, if I'm out of town, this is who's going to be coming to council meetings. This is who's going to be, which is what that position already does, basically, and just kind of making sure that the title fits what that person is doing. So those are the main kind of changes in there. We refined some of those maintenance tech things just to make it a little bit better, and also more based on performance, not just an expectation that I've been here 18 months, I should get a X number of dollars raise and stuff like that, or making something that's completely unattainable for people. So I just wanted to kind of go over those things to see if there was any questions or things we needed to discuss with those.
So based on the feedback, it's an item that we want to bring back with the feedback taken into account so that the city administrator and I can also work with individual council members. But what I've heard is not a lot of comfort with at least two of the director position titles being called director, needing clarification on where the department heads are identified within the organization chart, because there is a distinction between a department head and the other direct reports that the city administrator has, and that's in a sense a legal distinction as well, because it's in our code of ordinances. That the revised pay scale can be treated independent of the titles to a certain extent, although there may be some title shifts based on responsibilities, like Councilmember Reed said, that Director of Public Works matching as a department head probably should be in the same category as the other department heads, and so I think that feedback is valuable. I would be curious in terms of the Director of Public Works statement that of those changes that are proposed, if anybody has any objections to those, because I think those are, for me, make a lot of sense in terms of just recognizing that those are much more common titles than what we have currently in our system, and they also have a historical part of the city. And so that would be, if anybody has feedback on that, I'd be interested in hearing that. And so we can bring this back with your feedback taken into account and look at this also with some numbers in terms of clarification as far as where there is a realignment, if there's a need to identify, how that affects with the stipend, without the stipend, et cetera. So we have some more information to bring back. I did see Councilmember Rosengarten, you had your hand raised, and then Councilmember Medicus.
I was going to add to what you said and then something else, and I need to flip back and forth. So, so Carolyn, when you said Public Works Superintendent, it is now going to Assistant Director of Public Works, and you feel that and you said that was a position we used to have, okay? Got it. Grounds and Maintenance Supervisor, Parks and Grounds Superintendent. Supervisor simply directs employees, superintendent does projects and employees. Okay, got it. Okay, so I'm sold on those two. Then on just getting into the job descriptions themselves, you are using whoever, Matt and whoever else worked on this, if you're using present tense active with an S at all the verbs, you need to do all of them.
Yes. Yeah, that's.
And then if you go to, there's one whole job description, 2 pages don't do it, and then the 3rd page does.
Grammatical consistency through the job description.
Yeah, like page 174 and 175, those 2 pages of the whole 277 backup, and then 176 uses S's at the end of every verb. And was there something else? I think that was it. Thank you.
Just a quick note before Councilmember Medicus, I do also want to allow for members of the public to speak. We're kind of hitting that magic hour, but I also, the other note I took was to come back with a clarification on the HR, and if we're going to propose something where it's the accounting, or not the accounting, but the sort of the mechanics, of managing HR, payroll, things like that, fitting in one job description, and where the other HR responsibilities lie, we need to make sure that that's included as part of any updates we do, or if we want to recommend having a separate HR position that's dedicated to that, wherever that, I think we don't need that, but as a small city. But Councilmember Medicus.
Just for feedback on the Public Works, that makes sense to me, and I'm support of the 2 maintenance techs. I think that's really important for us to add those. And same thing with PD. Huh?
So I'm going to go ahead and open
sorry.
up for.
We're looking at the org chart.
Yeah.
Looks
Open up
good.
for members of the public to speak to this item, and then I believe what we'll be doing is not taking action on this and bringing it back with revised, based on the feedback. So with that, we'll open up for members of the public to speak.
Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Reese. I really appreciate all the thoughtful commentary that council has provided tonight. I agree with most of it. And I think that it was really well done, except of course we had too many names and gave the lawyer a heart attack. But yeah, so apart from that, not using names at all over here, I do think that we've actually, disagreeing with Council Member Rosengarten, I do actually think that we've made the argument for why it's important to have an assistant city administrator, because you don't have that elevation if you have that report. And I do think that you've actually made the argument for that. Not elevating everything to a director. I'm not in favor of that. I am not in favor of too many departments, and I feel like we're actually creating a Department of Finance. And I have a concern about that too, because all those things were always under administration. We've always had 3 essential departments. And I'm okay with, in some ways, the 4th Department of Development, because it almost merits it, even though it's a one-person department. So, and we had that with the Assistant City Administrator at one point. So I would say that. Those are 2 things. But I know you all were paying attention to that, so I'm just adding my comments. I'm just trying to say things that weren't said, and the small disagreement that I had about the lack of importance of that. The other thing that I think wasn't said that I want to add to the conversation is that we always don't do things in a small city, because we're expected to do all the things that a big city does, and there aren't enough people. You know, so we just have to acknowledge that. We try to have it not be something that we get sued over, but you cannot do all the things that are required of us. I will tell you that because I've been part of so many of these citizen reviews that we've had to do to plug the holes of all the things that all these lovely people cannot do, but they're still required to do. And so we have somehow plugged those holes sometimes with citizens doing salary surveys, with citizens doing reviews of the HR manuals, with all these processes that we have to just periodically do because we don't do them often enough, because there are just not enough people to do all the things that we have to do. And so I'm just going to say that every once in a while, some of us who remember ought to say, and now we need to make a committee to do this, to plug up this HR hole, because it tends to be HR type things that we have to somehow plug or fix or review or redo the org charts or the HR manuals or something. And that's just the way of things when you don't want to spend a bunch of money that you don't need to spend. The next thing that I would say about that is we keep skating over what happens if we made some of these job titles. And I just want to distinctly call it out that when you change these job titles, you're going to change the salary surveys. When you do that, that's going to happen. And we should have those figures of at least the ones that we're changing, of a faux salary survey to see what that impact is, because it's going to impact the long-range financial plan. Mm-hmm. And those are just the things that I didn't hear people say. And I know that they're probably in your minds, but I want to say them out loud and in public. There were things I didn't want to say in public, but those things I want to say out loud and in public. And I want to know, as an interested citizen who served on a lot of these committees and sat in on a lot of other ones, what is the impact when we do this? And it's not a small number, because the largest number, the largest variable is personnel. We all know that. Mm-hmm. And when we're changing all these top numbers, we're making a huge impact. And if we're going to argue about library cards, we sure as heck ought to be looking at the financial impacts of what these changes are going to be. And I just don't want that brushed over. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. You know, I probably support all the ones in public works. You know, I probably do. And I think that we really ought to consider all the department heads as potential stand-ins for Matt, or for the city administrator, no names, the city administrator. But I think if you don't want to keep having department heads, there is merit to having assistant city administrator to give you the buffer so that you're not creating all these departments. I think you're actually making an argument for that. And I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Council, any further discussion on this? But at this time, we're not planning on taking any action. We'll be bringing back based on feedback revisions. All right. Well, with that, we're a minute over, but if I can take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right. We are adjourned at 9:01 PM.